Good day, everybody. It's Michael Lappin from over at Solutions Engineering at Telesign. Today, I want to take you through a proof of concept 1 year retrospective. Let's see what we can learn about fraud by examining almost 400 proofs of concept here at Telesign that my team runs. And let's see if we can learn a little bit about fraud prevention. One of the things we like to practice on my team is the substantiation of your argument. In other words, if you're going to tell somebody something, make sure you've got some facts to back it up. With 400 proofs of concept in the bag for the last 12 months, we can arrive at some very interesting and important conclusions. So let's get into it. So what is a proof of concept? A proof of concept at Telesign is where we acquire a data set from a prospect or customer, and we analyze that data set with our intelligence platform or our phone ID platform. Those taken together are what we call our digital identity solution set here at Telesign. So what happens is the customer says, yes, we're interested in preventing different types of fraud. Please take this data set of phone numbers, perhaps email addresses and IP addresses, and analyze it for us and tell us what you find. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of rank the phone numbers that we look at into one of three basic buckets, which are the allow, in other words, this number and this information is okay, the flag, which is some of the data you might want to look at, or block, which is the data we think is probably fraudulent. We assign from 1 to 1,000 that tells the customer how risky a given phone number or email address actually is. Okay, so if we did 396 proof of concepts, you can see it's split sort of 2/3 and 1/3, 1/3 being the intelligence platform. And then phone ID has a variety of features and signals that allow us to tell a customer more about the consumers that are trying to get onto their systems, either by the website or the phone-based application or whatever it is. We can learn a lot from the phone numbers that are used for authentication, where, of course, Telesign helps with things like one-time passcodes on our omni-channel solutions that help with multi-factor authentication. And we can take that same data set and then we can run it through our system. So this is exactly 12 months, like September 23 to September 24. And this is a batch test report. So batch test is, in other words, a batch of data from a customer. We put it through the system and then we present to them what we found. Our average out of 396 proof of concepts is about 178,000 phone numbers that we will analyze in one of those proof of concepts. Now, of course, some customers give us smaller, some customers give us larger data sets. We've seen data sets that are only 1,000 numbers for 1 month of traffic. We'll see others that are 50 million onboarding requests for a given 30-day period. So quite a bit of variance there. But the average then is, quite a big chunk. So you can imagine a spreadsheet of 178,000 phone numbers, quite a bit. The average block rate, which is the all-important first stat we look at, is about 15%. So about 15 out of 100 of all of these phone numbers on all of these proofs of concept, we would recommend blocking those numbers. So that's a staggering amount of fraud, truly. And then the flag rate, which is sort of that middle tier, which are some of the things you might submit to our data science team to then help tune the machine learning algorithm so that we know who real customers are or who other fraudulent consumers might be. All right, so let's take a look at some of these important reflections here very quickly. There's a graph here that has a list of all of the countries that have taken part. In other words, the data sets come from different countries. You can see United States leading the way and down the line we go. And then if you have a mixture, you have 97 here, proof of concepts, that are actually from multiple different countries. Now, of course, we analyze the industry where all of these data sets come from. And you can see in this graph here, we've got, of course, primarily financial technology. So fintech, we call that, payment services, banking, social networking, online booking, that kind of stuff, where quite a bit of money is changing hands, whether it's going into the platform or coming out of the platform. We need to make sure that it's not at risk. So lots of different reflection here on what kind of industries use this kind of fraud prevention system. I would say the most popular are going to be banking and payment services. Those seem to be rolling together essentially. And that's the majority of the customers that come to us and say, we need you to take a look at this data. Tell me what you find. Now, probably the most important thing down here is this use case graph. Let's blow this one up for just a moment here. This donut is reflective of all of the different use cases that we actually find in the data. So what's actually happening in fraud prevention? The big dark blue piece of the donut here, probably 3/4 of it, is about onboarding or account registration. So this is when a consumer initially goes onto a platform of whatever type, from whatever industry, from whatever country, and tries to set up an account. That's what account registration or onboarding is. Within this are many types of fraud. Account takeover, which is exactly what it sounds. Someone is trying to put together an account that they can do things with. They can steal, they can do all kinds of friendly fraud, they can do all kinds of things with it. Also, synthetic identification, actually proving that a synthetic ID for a person or a partial person will work on given types of platforms. Maybe it's a buy now, pay later or payday loan type of a website. So you can imagine how that needs to be secured for our customers from fraudulent type consumers. Breaking it down into some other pieces here, credit application, of course, is going to be a big use case. Also, account sign-in. So after the big blue piece, in other words, you've onboarded, you've registered. Now, tomorrow, what are you going to do? You're going to sign back in, and you're going to put in your login, your password, get your one-time passcode, probably from Telesign, so you can get authenticated onto your banking app or whatever app it is you want to use. Also, we have any type of transactional thing. Maybe this is where that retail group will fall. And then this is something called IRSF, or International Revenue Sharing Fraud. It's way more common than you think. It doesn't affect the actual consumer. It affects the corporation who's trying to secure their platform. And it basically is very easily detectable, has a very high block rate of maybe hundreds or thousands of numbers that are trying to propagate this type of fraud. We see this very, very popular today, especially in Europe and Asia. So anyway, this is really important because this is a breakdown of what's actually happening, what kind of attacks are actually happening to our customers, what kind of fraud is actually being successful and successfully stopped by the Telesign platforms. So use cases, again, big deal. Here's the fluctuation of traffic over the year, basically, that shows, where did we get 65 million phone numbers? And then if we look at this graph, and we can blow this one up as well, just to take a look at these use cases a little bit better, you can see this is that big blue piece where we have the onboarding block rate of about 42%. So imagine that, 42 out of 100 phone numbers we have seen in the 65 million item set are recommended for blocking. So that's a tremendous number, and that's for onboarding and ongoing authentication. So that's the kind of number that our sellers on the Telesign side have sort of memorized. Now, mileage may vary, of course. In reality, it may be less, it may be more, but this is something that we've substantiated with 396 data sets from different customers. So very, very telling, very, very important. Let's go back and see this in the black here so we can kind of read about the different use cases. So there they are across the bottom. Account sign-in, of course, is important. This IRSF thing often has very large numbers of block rates because there's many, many phone numbers trying to propagate the phone number. It's called range activity. So that one, we see very high block rates, often much higher than sometimes 1 out of 2 numbers is fraudulent. And you can see the spike in traffic when we do a traffic analysis. You can actually see that information, and you can see a very easily identifiable fraud attack. And then we have things like just basic transactions, credit applications, where you have a low block rate, but the attempted fraud, if successful, can be extremely costly, and credit applications and things like that. Okay, so this is kind of a nice way to look at the kind of blocking that we would recommend to our customers across all of these proofs of concept. What we do when we do a proof of concept is my team takes the data, runs it through the system, and then does a presentation of findings for the customer and say, this is the interesting things that we've seen. And we show them a whole lot of traffic analysis, and we show them the different fraudulent numbers and why they're fraudulent. We can associate that with IP address or, again, fraudulent email addresses. So it paints a really graphic picture of fraud and tells them what they need to know and tells them if Telesign can help them solve the problem. Okay, so let's just recap. So we've done almost 400 proof of concepts over the past year, yielding 65 million numbers that we needed to analyze, which is 178,000 per proof of concept. The average block rate is almost 15% across that data set. So what does that tell you? There's a lot of fraud going on in a lot of different industries in all of the different countries of the world. And the use cases focus upon this onboarding and then authentication. So how do we get a reliable, real consumer onto our platform safely? That's the main thing people are caring about today. And then within that, you see fraud in the form of account takeover, synthetic identification, this IRSF or SMS pumping type of fraud. So this paints that picture of reality. Now, again, mileage may vary, and your data may be something slightly different than this, but it's worth looking at. It's worth considering. So if you want to come to Telesign, come to Solutions Engineering and talk to us about doing something like this, we would love to talk to you about it and talk about your data. That's what we like to geek out on the most. So please feel free to contact us. Again, this is Michael Lappin, and I thank you for your attention. Take care.